The sun was low in the red sky, and the wind carried dust across the wide fields. John wiped the sweat from his brow as he pushed the old plow through the hard soil. Life on the colony world was never easy, but he was used to long days and silence. Out here, there were no neighbors close enough to hear his voice, no sounds except the whistle of wind and the creak of old machines. But on that evening, the silence broke. At first, John thought it was only a shadow passing over him, maybe a bird flying low. But the shadow grew larger, and when he looked up, his breath caught in his throat. A tall figure stood at the edge of his field. She was thin, her body wrapped in torn cloth, her skin a faint silver blue that glowed under the dying sun. Her dark eyes were wide, full of desperation, and behind her, clutching at her legs, were two small children. Their faces were hollow, their ribs sharp under their skin. John froze. He knew what she was. A Zirani. His mind went back to the war. He remembered burning villages, soldiers screaming, commanders shouting that the Zirani were monsters who wanted humans dead. Even years after the fighting ended, fear remained. Most colonists would rather die than let one of them step onto human land. Yet here she was. The woman staggered forward, falling to her knees in the dirt. The children clung to her arms as she bowed her head low. Her voice cracked, dry and broken, but the words were clear. "I'll work your fields, human," she said. "Just feed my hungry children." John stood still, his heart beating hard. He tightened his grip on the plow handle, though it was useless as a weapon. The children stared at him with wide, frightened eyes, their tiny hands clutching their mother's torn clothes. For a long moment, no one moved. The wind picked up, carrying the dry smell of dust and earth. John's thoughts raced. This was wrong. This was dangerous. If anyone saw a Zirani on his land, they would think he had betrayed his people. They might drag him out in the night or burn his farm to the ground. But her voice, it was not the voice of an enemy. It was the voice of a mother. The woman raised her head, and John saw the truth in her eyes. There was no hatred there, no weapon hidden in her hands, only fear, exhaustion, and a desperate plea for mercy. "I'll work," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "I'll work until I fall. But my children, please, they are starving." One of the little ones tried to speak, but only a weak cough came out. The other leaned against her shoulder, too tired to lift their head. John felt a heavy weight in his chest. He remembered faces from the war, faces of children who had never come home. He had told himself for years that he fought for survival, that war gave no choice. But standing there now, looking at those two fragile lives, the old excuses felt thin. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully. The woman flinched as if she expected him to strike her down. Instead, John knelt in the dirt. He pulled a water flask from his belt and set it on the ground between them. The woman's hands shook as she reached for it. She passed it first to her children, watching as they drank greedily, their lips trembling against the metal rim. Only after they had finished did she take a sip herself. John watched in silence. Something inside him stirred, a memory of his own mother years ago, making sure her children ate before she touched a single bite. When the woman finally lowered the flask, she looked at him again. "Please," she said, "let us stay. I'll work your fields. I'll obey your rules. Just don't let them die." The last light of the sun painted the horizon blood red. John's gaze shifted to the farmhouse in the distance. If he took them in, he would be breaking the unspoken law of the colony. He could be hated, punished, even killed for it. But if he turned them away, they would not live to see another dawn. The decision hung heavy in the air, pressing down on him like a storm cloud. John straightened slowly, his shadow stretching long across the field. His voice was low, careful, and uncertain. "You don't belong here," he said. "If the others find you, they'll kill you all." The woman lowered her head, her arms tightening around her children. She did not argue. She only whispered, "Then let us die in the fields, working for you. At least my children will not die alone." John's throat tightened. He turned his gaze back to the children, their thin arms, their hollow eyes. And in that moment, the farmer knew the quiet life he had built was about to change forever. The farmhouse stood quiet under the pale light of the moons. Inside, the old wooden floor creaked as John paced back and forth, his mind heavy with thoughts. Outside, in the barn, the alien woman and her children rested on the hay, hidden from prying eyes. He had given them bread, though it was more than he could afford to share. He had told himself it was only for one night. By morning, he would decide. But morning came, and the problem only grew larger. John stared out of the window at the fields. The crops were thin this year, the soil was dry, the machines were old, and his hands alone were not enough to keep everything alive. He needed help. He knew that, but not this kind of help. His people would call him a traitor. He imagined the voices of the colony council. You gave shelter to a Zerani? You fed their young? Have you forgotten the war? Have you forgotten what they did? John's jaw tightened. He had not forgotten. He remembered the night skies burning red, the smell of smoke, the screams echoing through the comms. He remembered seeing men he fought beside fall to Zerani blades and fire. And yet, the children's faces returned to him in memory, their weak bodies huddled close to their mother, their eyes too tired even for tears. He had seen starving people before, but this was different. This was not an enemy soldier. This was life clinging to life, fragile and helpless. Behind him, the old door creaked. John turned. The alien woman stood in the doorway, silent and watchful. She had washed her face at the pump, but her clothes were still torn, her body still weary. The children slept in the barn, too weak to rise early. John's hand brushed the edge of the table, where his old rifle lay. It was habit to keep it near, but now he wondered if it was for protection or temptation. You should leave, he said at last, his voice rough. Her dark eyes did not flinch. If we leave, my children will die. John's chest tightened. If the colony finds you here, I could die too. The woman stepped forward, slow and steady. I will work your fields. You cannot do it alone. I saw your land. It is too much for one man. John frowned. And what do you know about farming? I know how to keep life alive, she answered softly. I have kept my children alive when the universe wanted them dead. Give me soil, give me seed, and I will work until my body breaks. Her words cut deeper than any weapon. John turned away, staring again through the window. Out there, beyond the horizon, were other farms, other colonists. If one of them came early, if one of them saw strange prints in the dirt, it would all be over. Still, he felt the weight of her eyes on his back. Why here? John asked quietly. Why my farm? The woman lowered her gaze. Because you were alone, and because you did not shoot when you first saw me. John shut his eyes. He hated how true her words were. The war had trained him to pull the trigger without thought, but something in him had hesitated. And now, because of that moment of weakness, or mercy, his whole life was twisted into a knot. He turned back to her. If I let you stay, there will be rules. You don't leave the barn unless I say so. You don't go near the road. No fires, no light at night. If anyone sees you, they won't, she said firmly. Her voice surprised him. It was not the voice of a beggar now, but of someone holding tight to the last thread of dignity. For the first time, John looked at her not just as a stranger, not just as a Zerani, but as a mother standing on the edge of despair. The silence stretched long between them, broken only by the distant cry of wind. Finally, John gave a short nod. One chance, he said. You stay hidden. You work hard. If anything goes wrong, anything, I'll end this myself. Do you understand? The woman bowed her head. I understand. Her name, he would soon learn, was Koresh, but for now, she was only the stranger. That night, John sat alone on the porch, his rifle resting across his knees. He stared up at the stars, thinking of the colony. He thought of his neighbors, of the council, of the whispers that already followed him because he kept to himself. He wondered what they would say if they knew the truth, that in his barn slept the very thing they feared most. And for the first time in years, John felt the future pressing in on him, sharp and dangerous, because helping her was not just a small kindness, it was a choice that could cost him everything. The days that followed felt strange to John, as if the rhythm of his farm had changed overnight. At dawn, he would rise as always, pulling on his boots and stepping out into the cool air. But now, when he walked to the barn, he no longer opened the door to empty silence. He found Koresh already awake, her silver-blue hands busy with small tasks. She swept the barn floor clear of straw, fixed loose boards with surprising skill, and even mended old ropes with thread she pulled from her own torn clothes. She did not waste a moment. Her children, though still weak, had begun to move about more. The boy, small and wide-eyed, clung to his mother most of the day. The girl, a little older, sometimes followed Joe, and at a distance, watching him with curiosity, though she darted away whenever he turned. John told himself it was temporary. One chance, he had said. That was all. Still, as he walked the rows of his dry fields, he found himself listening for the sound of Koresh's footsteps behind him. She carried herself with quiet strength, lifting tools heavier than he expected, working the soil with a steady rhythm. She did not complain, not once, though the sweat ran down her face and the dirt clung to her hands. At first, John gave her simple tasks, ones she could not ruin even if she tried, carrying water, clearing stones, pulling weeds, but she did more than he asked. She studied the crops, touched the soil, even sniffed at the dry stalks with a strange frown. "You plant too shallow," she said one morning, her voice low but firm. John turned sharply. "I've been farming this land for 10 years. Koresh looked at him with calm eyes. "And still, the soil is thin. I can help it breathe." He almost snapped back but stopped himself. The truth was, his crops were failing. He had tried everything he knew, and still the earth seemed to fight him. Could she know something he did not? Reluctantly, he let her show him. She dug deeper trenches, mixed crushed stones from the stream with the soil, and pressed the seeds down with careful hands. Her movements were strange, almost ritual-like, but she worked with a focus that impressed him. By evening, John noticed something else. For the first time in weeks, the field looked alive. Still, trust did not come easy. That night, sitting at the table inside his farmhouse, John cleaned his rifle and stared at the barn through the window. He thought of the colony patrols, of neighbors who sometimes wandered too close, and of the council's cold eyes. If they found out, it would not matter if Koresh worked herself to the bone. She and her Hildren would be dragged away, or worse, and John would be called a traitor. The thought kept him awake long into the night. The next day, while Koresh worked the soil, John spoke at last. "Why are you really here?" he asked. Koresh paused, her hands buried in the dirt. "I told you, my children were starving." "That's not an answer," John said. His voice was sharp. "The Zorani still have clans. You could have stayed with them. Why come to a human farm?" Koresh's eyes darkened. She pressed her hands into the earth as if drawing strength from it. "Because my clan is gone." Her voice trembled, though only slightly. "After the war, we had no leaders, no food. The strong took what little was left, and the weak were abandoned. I fled with my children. We have been running ever since." John felt a cold knot twist in his stomach. He remembered war reports, commanders saying the Zorani would rebuild quickly, that they were dangerous if left alive. But Koresh's story painted a different picture, one of broken families, hunger, and betrayal. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the struggling crops. Finally, John muttered, "If anyone finds out you're here, it won't matter what your story is." Koresh lifted her head. Her gaze was steady, almost defiant. "Then they must not find out." John studied her, searching for some hint of trickery, but he found none. Only a mother's fierce determination, the kind that could burn through fear itself. The uneasy alliance was set. In the days that followed, they worked side by side, though always with distance. John gave orders, Koresh obeyed, and together they began to shape the land into something stronger. Her children stayed hidden, though sometimes John caught glimpses of their curious faces peeking from the barn door. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, John saw the girl standing in the field. She held a small wooden toy he had carved long ago, something he thought lost. She looked at him, wide-eyed, before darting back to the barn. For the first time, John felt something shift inside him. Not trust, not yet, but the faint stirring of something he had long buried. Perhaps, he thought, they were not so different after all. But as the stars appeared in the sky, John's mind turned dark again. If the colony ever learned the truth, no amount of hard work would save them, and no alliance, uneasy or not, could protect them forever. Night on the farm was always quiet, but now the silence felt different. It was not the peace John once enjoyed, but the heavy silence of secrets. The barn glowed faintly with a lantern's weak light. John sat near the door, his rifle across his knees. He told himself it was just in case of wild beasts or patrols, but he knew the truth. Part of him still feared the alien family resting only a few steps away. Inside, Koresh hummed softly. It was not a song John understood, only a strange rhythm in a language that rolled like water over stone. Her children lay close to her, drifting into sleep as her voice wove comfort around them. John listened despite himself. Something about the melody stirred an ache in his chest, pulling up memories he had buried years ago, memories of nights in the war, when soldiers hummed their own quiet songs to keep fear away. When the children were asleep, Koresh stepped out of the barn. She moved slowly, her face pale in the moonlight. She did not look at John at first, only at the field stretching dark under the stars. "Your children?" John asked quietly, surprising himself. She shook her head. "No songs of joy. This was a prayer. For strength." John frowned. Strength for what? Koresh's eyes glimmered, reflecting the lantern light. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her voice came low, heavy with the weight of years. For surviving the end of everything I knew. John's grip on the rifle tightened. He wanted to tell her no. To speak, not to dig into wounds that both of them carried, but part of him wanted to hear, even if it hurt. Koresh drew a slow breath. When the war ended, your leaders said, the Zerani were beaten, but beaten is not the same as destroyed. Our ships were gone, our armies shattered, and our leaders, her voice cracked, our leaders vanished. They fled, leaving us to starve. John stared at the ground. He remembered how his commander celebrated the day of victory. He remembered the speeches. The Zerani threat is over. Humanity is safe. He had believed it. But Koresh's voice told a different story. Families turned on each other, she continued. The strong stole food, the weak were left to die. Villages burned, not from your fire but from ours. I took my children and ran. I ran from my own people as much as from yours. She lifted her gaze to John. Do you understand, human? The war did not end for us, it only changed its shape. Her words hit harder than he expected. John's chest felt heavy, like the weight of the rifle was pressing into his heart. He thought of the orders he had followed years ago. Burn the crops, salt the soil, leave nothing alive that could feed the enemy. He had carried out those orders without question. He had told himself it was necessary, that it saved human lives. But now, listening to her, he wondered if those orders had planted seeds of endless hunger that still grew in the dark. You think I don't know pain? John muttered, his voice rough. I watched friends die. I buried brothers in fields not so different from this one. War didn't leave us untouched. Koresh's eyes softened, though her face was still carved with sorrow. Yes, you lost. We lost. But the children, they should not have to pay for our mistakes. Her words cut deeper than any blade. John looked away, unable to meet her gaze. In his mind, he saw again the faces of the children she carried with her, thin and trembling, and behind them the faces of other children he had once seen in the smoke of war. For a long time, silence stretched between them. The night wind whispered through the dry fields, carrying the scent of dust. Finally, John spoke. If the colony learns about you, they won't care about your story. They'll see an enemy. They'll see the war in your eyes. Koresh nodded slowly. Then you must decide what you see. The words struck him like a hammer. What did he see? A threat? A beggar? Or something else? Something human, even if not of his kind? John stood, his rifle still in hand. He could not answer her, not yet. Instead, he walked past her into the barn. The children slept soundly, their small bodies curled together for warmth. For the first time, John pulled a blanket from his own supplies and laid it over them. When he stepped back outside, Koresh watched him, silent, but with something new in her eyes, something like gratitude, or maybe the first spark of trust. John sat back on the porch, staring out at the endless night. Shadows of the past weighed on him, but he knew one thing with sharp clarity. The war had never really ended. It lived on, in wounds that crossed species, in hunger that refused to die. And now, in his fields, two shadows had found him, remnants of that war. Whether they would destroy him or save him, he could not yet tell. But he knew one truth. The past had come back to his doorstep, and it would not leave quietly. The days grew warmer, but the air around John's farm felt colder with every passing sunrise. Koresh worked the fields in silence, her silver blue skin glistening with sweat under the sun. Her children stayed hidden in the barn, peeking out only when John brought them scraps of food. From a distance, it almost looked like a normal farm again. Rows of crops, the steady rhythm of labor, but John knew better. Beneath the surface, danger waited like a wolf in the tall grass. It began with whispers. Two neighbors came by one morning, riding old transport. It's across the dusty road. They waved, forced smiles on their faces, but John saw the suspicion in their eyes. Haven't seen you much in town lately, one said. You keeping? Busy out here? Too busy, John answered. His voice was flat, his hands tight on the gate. They laughed, but the sound was sharp. Well, keep an eye out. Patrol spotted tracks near the ridge. Looked strange, like something not human. John's chest went still. He forced a nod, muttered something about wild animals, and sent them on their way. Only when their transports faded into the horizon did he let out the breath he'd been holding. That night, he warned Koresh. You need to be careful, they're watching. One mistake and we're finished. Koresh met his gaze calmly. I will not let them find us. My children will stay hidden. But John's mind would not rest. Every sound outside the farmhouse seemed louder now, Every shadow looked like a patrol creeping closer. 2 days later, his fears proved true. A patrol of armed colonists rode up to his farm, dust swirling around their boots as they dismounted. Their leader, a broad man with a scarred face, stepped forward. John knew him. Captain Harris, a war veteran, one of the men who still carried hatred like a torch. "Evening, John," Harris said, his voice too smooth. "We've had reports. Strange footprints. Small, light, not human." John's heart pounded. He kept his face calm. "I've seen nothing but rabbits and wild dogs. You're wasting your time." Harris's cold eyes scanned the fields, then the barn. "Mind if we take a look around?" John's grip tightened on his rifle, though it hung harmlessly at his side. He forced a shrug. "Nothing to hide. Go ahead." The patrol spread out, stomping through the rows of crops, kicking at the soil, peering into shadows. John followed close, trying to keep his breathing steady. Inside the barn, Koresh and her children lay silent in the loft, buried under hay and blankets, barely daring to breathe. One soldier stopped near the barn door, frowning at a faint scuff mark on the groin, when John's blood turned to ice. "That's nothing," he said quickly. "One of my old tools dragged across the dirt." The soldier looked unconvinced, but Harris barked, "Leave it. If John says it's nothing, it's nothing. For now." They left, but not before Harris leaned close to John, his voice low and sharp. "You see anything? Anything. You report it. If you're hiding something, the council will know, and you'll hang beside whatever monster you're protecting." When the patrol finally disappeared into the distance, John sagged against the fence, his whole body trembling with the weight of what almost happened. That night, Koresh came to him. "You risked yourself," she said quietly. John glared at her, though his anger was not truly at her. "Don't thank me. If they'd found you, we'd all be dead. Do you understand that? Dead." Her eyes softened. "Then I will make sure they do not find us. I swore my children would live. I will not break that vow." John turned away, but her words burned in his mind. The next days were worse. He noticed neighbors watching his farm longer than before. He heard the sound of patrol transports on the road at night. He even found a broken fence post, as if someone had tested his land, looking for weakness. The tension grew heavy, pressing down on every breath. Koresh felt it too. She worked harder, faster, her hands blistered but unyielding. Her children stayed silent, whispering only in their own tongue when they thought no one listened. Even their laughter, small and fragile, was hushed now, like birds hiding from hunters. One evening, John stood at the edge of his field, watching the sunset. The horizon glowed red, the same color he remembered from battlefields long ago. Koresh came to stand beside him, silent at first. "They will not stop searching," she said softly. "No," John answered, "they won't." "Then why risk everything, foe? Or us?" The question cut deep. John wanted to say he didn't know, that it was madness, but the truth was there in his heart, heavy and undeniable. Because when he looked at her children, he saw the war's ghosts. He saw lives destroyed by orders and hatred, by choices he himself had once carried out. "Because I'm tired of burying children," he said at last. His voice was low, rough with old pain. Koresh studied him, her eyes reflecting the dying light. For the first time, she bowed her head not in desperation, but in respect. The uneasy alliance had become something more, something dangerous. Because now, John was no longer just protecting strangers. He was protecting family, and the colony would not forgive him for it. The sun burned hotter each day, and the sky gave no rain. By midsummer, the fields cracked under the weight of drought. John walked the rows, his boots crunching on dry soil. The leaves of his crops curled brown at the edges, and even the strongest stalks bent low as if bowing to death. He carried a bucket to the pump, but the water came slow and thin, a tired trickle that mocked his effort. Food was running out, not just for him, for everyone. The colony town grew restless. Neighbors quarreled in the markets. Families hoarded scraps, and whispers of theft spread like fire. Patrols rode more often now, their eyes sharp, their hands always close to their weapons. John felt the tension pressing in from all sides. He could hardly leave the farm without sensing suspicion burning into his back. More than once, he caught neighbors watching him too long, their faces tight with hunger and mistrust. And inside the barn, Koresh and her children grew thinner. Even with the little he shared, their cheeks hollowed, their steps slowed. Yet Koresh did not stop. She worked the fields with him, her hands blistered and raw, her body trembling with exhaustion. One evening, after a long day under the merciless sun, John found her kneeling in the dirt, her children beside her. She held a tiny green shoot in her hand, one of the few plague ants still alive, and whispered to it as if it were sacred. "They need this," she said softly when John approached. "If it lives, they live." John felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had seen soldiers cling to luck charms in battle, but never had he seen someone pour so much hope into a single fragile sprout. That night, he could not sleep. Hunger gnawed at him, but it was not only his stomach, it was the fear of what was coming. Desperation could make men cruel. He knew it well, and he was right. The breaking point came with the darkness. He woke to the sound of boots crunching on dry soil outside his house. Voices carried low and sharp through the night. John grabbed his rifle and stepped to the door. 4 colonists stood at the fence, their lanterns casting jagged shadows. Among them was Harris, the scar-faced captain of the patrol. His eyes gleamed with anger or hunger. It was hard to tell the difference. "Evening, John," Harris called. "We've come for answers." John's grip tightened on the rifle. "What kind of answers?" Harris stepped forward. "We've seen tracks on your land, strange ones. Too small for a man, too light for a beast. You wouldn't be hiding something, would you?" The others muttered in agreement, their hands resting on knives and rifles. Behind them, the colony's thirst and fear burned in their eyes. John's heart thundered. He thought of the barn, Koresh, the children. "They're my tracks," he lied. "I've been working day and night. Maybe I walk lighter than you think." But Harris only sneered. "Don't play games. People are starving. If you got mouths hidden here, we deserve to know. We won't let traitors steal food from the rest of us." The men stepped closer, lantern light spilling across the yard. John's finger brushed the trigger of his rifle, though he prayed he wouldn't have to use it. "There's nothing here but me and dying crow." "Ops, you think I'd share my water with strangers while my own land turns to dust?" One of the colonists spat into the dirt. "Then you won't mind if we take a look inside your barn?" John's chest turned to stone. Before he could speak, the barn door creaked. A faint gasp carried into the night. The little girl had woken. She stood in the doorway, her thin frame glowing faint in the lantern light, her silver-blue skin marking her for what she was. The colonists froze. Silence crashed down, broken only by the hiss of wind. Harris's eyes went wide, then narrowed into fury. "You lying bastard," he growled. "You've been feeding them, protecting them." The men raised their weapons. In a heartbeat, Koresh stepped forward, pulling her daughter behind her. Her arms spread wide, her body a shield. Her voice cut through the night, fierce and trembling. "If you want them, you'll have to kill me first." The colonists shouted, their anger spilling like fire. Harris leveled his rifle, his finger curling on the trigger. And John moved. He stepped between them, his rifle raised not at Koresh, not at the children, but at the colonists. "Stop!" His voice roared louder than the wind. "No one touches them, not while I live." The men froze, stunned by his defiance. Harris snarled, "You've lost your mind, John. You'd turn against your own people for them?" John's chest heaved, his face hard as stone. "I'm done watching children starve. If that makes me a traitor, then so be it." For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The lanterns flickered, the rifles trembled in calloused hands. And in that fragile silence, John knew the life he had built was gone. He had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The breaking point had come, and now there would be no turning away from the storm it unleashed. The night hung heavy with silence, broken only by the crackle of lantern flames and the sharp breathing of men with weapons in their hands. John stood at the center of the yard, his rifle raised. Behind him, Koresh clutched her daughter, her son pressed against her legs. Their silver-blue skin glowed faint in the lantern light, a mark that made them enemy in every colonist's eye. Before him, Harris and the others glared with open fury. "You've lost your mind, John," Harris spat. "You'd betray your own kind for this?" He gestured sharply at Koresh. "They don't belong here. They never will." John's voice came rough, steady. "They belong as much as we do. They're starving children, Harris. If you're so human, then look them in the eyes before you pull that trigger." The men shifted uneasily. One lowered his rifle just a little. Another muttered under his breath, uncertain. Hunger had made them cruel, but not all of them were blind. Still, Harris sneered. "You think this makes you noble? It makes you weak. You know what they did to us in the war. You know the blood on their hands." John's jaw tightened. Memories of fire and screams clawed at his mind, but he forced them down. His voice cracked with raw honesty. "I know the blood on my hands, too. I carried out orders. I burned their fields. I starved their families. Maybe this is my punishment, or maybe it's my chance to make it right." The silence stretched long. The colonists' eyes flickered between their captain and the farmer who now defied him. Koresh whispered behind John, her voice trembling but strong. "If you must kill us, then kill us together. But my children, they have done nothing. Spare them." Her plea cut through the night like a blade. Even the hard faces of the colonists shifted with discomfort. The children's wide, hollow eyes stared out from behind her, fragile sparks of life clinging to the edge of death. Harris raised his rifle higher, his voice sharp. "Enough. Mercy is weakness. Weakness kills us all. Step aside, John, or die with them." John's heart pounded. His finger brushed the trigger. He could see it. One wrong move, and blood would paint the dirt. But instead of lowering his rifle, John took a step forward. His shadow stretched across the yard, tall in the lantern light. "No," he said, his voice like iron. "If they starve, we starve together. If they die, I die too. That's my choice." The words struck like thunder. The men wavered. One lowered his weapon completely, shame flickering in his eyes. Another stepped back, muttering, "They're just children." But Harris's fury only grew. His finger curled tight on the trigger. "Then you're a traitor, John, and traitors die." The moment froze, stretched thin as glass. Then Koresh's daughter coughed, a weak, fragile sound but sharp enough to break the stillness. All eyes turned to her small frame, her trembling shoulders, and for the first time Harris hesitated. Not much, not long, but enough. One of the colonists shoved his rifle down. "This isn't right, Harris, not tonight. We came here for food, not blood." Another nodded quickly. "Let the council decide. This is bigger than us." The grip of the mob cracked, splitting along the line between fear and conscience. Harris cursed, his face dark with rage, but he saw the shift, the doubt in his men. To push further now meant standing alone. At last, with a bitter snarl, he lowered his rifle. "Fine, but this isn't over, John. The council will hear of this, and when they come, they'll burn this place to the ground, with you in it." He turned sharply, motioning for the others. Lanterns bobbed as the patrol retreated into the night, leaving dust and silence behind. John stood unmoving until the last light faded. Only then did his rifle sag at his side. His chest heaved, sweat rolling down his brow, though the night was cool. Behind him, Koresh stepped forward. Her hand trembled as it touched his arm. "You chose us," she whispered, "even when it could cost you everything." John looked at her, his voice low. "No one should have to beg for their children's lives. Not human, not Zerani, not anyone." Her eyes shone in the moonlight, and for the first time, she did not look only desperate. She looked strong, as if hope had finally taken root again. The children pressed against their mother, their small eyes fixed on John with something he had not seen before. Trust. As the farm settled back into silence, John stared at the dark horizon. He knew Harris would not rest. The council would come. The danger was far from over. But for now, for this night, he had made his choice. And in the quiet, Koresh's words lingered in his ears. "You've fed my children, human, but one day, they may save yours." John did not know if it was a promise or a warning, but as the stars wheeled above, he felt something stir inside him, a fragile seed of hope in soil long thought barren. The war had broken many things, yet perhaps, here in the dust and hunger, something new could grow, something worth protecting.